COVID-19 is a key topic in any conversation these days, and lots of news related to that in the QMJHL this week. And the biggest news is the resumption of play in the province of Quebec. You may recall the QMJHL had decided to suspend play for the East and West divisions up until October 28th, even teams that were not in so-called red zones in the province of Quebec. Well, the Q decided this week that teams not in red zones could resume play. The Q has also had active discussions with public health in Quebec about a plan to get teams in red zones back on the ice. However, that was not approved in time for this weekend, but we are going to see some games as Rimouski and Baie-Comeau play, as well as Val-d'Or and Rouyn-Noranda. Now, worth noting, the Sherbrooke Phoenix not in a red zone, but they're still recovering from a COVID-19 outbreak, so they're not in action this week. Drummondville and Blainville-Boisbriand, teams that are in red zones, wouldn't be playing either because they're also dealing with the fallout from a COVID-19 outbreak. The Gatineau Olympique have learned they will not be able to get into the Robert-Gaudin Center until the spring because it's being used as a site in the battle against COVID-19. President Norm MacMillan is looking at March 15th as a date to move in because the rink wouldn't be available until February 15th, and then we'd need time to convert it over. So it is possible, if that gets pushed back, that Gatineau's next home game in a regular arena will be actually at the new Slush Puppy Center when the new arena gets built for the coming season. Of course, we've been watching at teams that are in red zones. The city of Shawinigan now in a red zone as well, and all the red zone activity in the province of Quebec, the cities in those zones, they're on those restrictions until November 23rd. But again, the Q is looking at a plan to see if they can get those teams in play. Now, the Sherbrooke Phoenix did return to practice this week. 7 of the 8 players who had tested positive practiced on Monday. One player still suffering from fatigue. Stéphane Julien, the head coach of the Phoenix, had contacted the league and said that his team would not have wanted to play this week. Also, as part of the fight against COVID-19 and as part of this plan to get teams in action at Victoriaville in a red zone, conducted COVID-19 tests, and no member of their team tested positive. So that is good news. The big news of the week outside the QMJHL is that Team Canada has announced the training camp roster for the 2021 World Junior Hockey Championships. 9 QMJHL players on the list. 3 defensemen, 19-year-old defenseman Justin Barron of Halifax, 19-year-old D. Jordan Spence from Moncton, and 18-year-old defenseman Lucas Cormier from Charlottetown. The forwards are 18-year-old forward Maverick Bourque of Shawinigan, 18-year-old Hendrix Lapierre of Chicoutimi, 19-year-old Dawson Mercer out of Chicoutimi, 19-year-old forward Jacob Pelche of Val-d'Or, 19-year-old forward Samuel Poulin of Sherbrooke, and 19-year-old forward Xavier Simoneau of Drummondville, who went undrafted in the NHL draft, but Hockey Canada liking what they see from him. Speaking of the draft, Central Scouting has released its first list ahead of the 2021 NHL draft. Players who were given an A grade from the QMJHL, which is basically projected to be a first-rounder at this point. There are 3 of them. 17-year-old forward Zach Bolduc of Rimouski, 18-year-old forward Xavier Bourgault of Shawinigan, and 17-year-old forward Zach Leroux of Halifax. Won't go through the whole list because we'll be here all night, but we'll go through the players from the Maritime divisions that were given B and C rankings. The B-ranked players are 17-year-old defenseman Oscar Plendowski of Charlottetown, 17-year-old forward Peter Reynolds of the Sea Dogs, 17-year-old forward Joshua Waugh of St. John, and 17-year-old defenseman Cameron Wynot of Halifax. Players with C rankings are Attila Biasca, the import who has not yet been able to come to Halifax. He's a 17-year-old forward. 17-year-old defenseman Zach Bigger of Bathurst, 17-year-old forward Jacob Brabenek, who is an import for Charlottetown, or at least they hope that he'll play this year as an import. Also 17-year-old forward Cole Huckins of Bathurst, Riley Kidney, another 17-year-old forward from Bathurst, 17-year-old forward Cameron McDonald of St. John, and 18-year-old defenseman William Trudeau of Charlottetown. Now, big bombshell coming down today regarding the Ontario Hockey League. You may have seen this earlier in the week, the OHL releasing its return to play plan, and they are targeting a February 4th start, which is the latest of the 3 major junior leagues. They will play a 40-game schedule, and interesting, the press release is worded that games will be primarily played against opponents of geographic proximity. Now, a lot of fans in the OHL have yearned for realignment for some time, so whether or not that comes as a byproduct of this press release has been a bit ambiguous, but that is what we've been told. 8 teams in the playoffs as opposed to 16. It's also the OHL's turn to host the Memorial Cup this year. Well, we could ask all kinds of questions about the logistics of whether that tournament could take place. Oshawa and Sault Ste. Marie were the 2 teams that were in the running to host the Memorial Cup. Now, that's what's come down from the OHL. But the big bombshell that came down today was from Public Health in Ontario saying that body checking will not be permitted if the OHL restarts its season. So a lot of people are asking questions as to how that will work. The government had said this before, and now they've apparently made this final, but we'll see. Lots can happen before now and the time the OHL season starts. Take a look at a few roster notes from around the Maritime Division and the QMJHL. Alexei Gravel returning to the ice for Halifax this week. Of course, he decided to report back to the Mooseheads, had to do his 14-day quarantine. You may have seen this on social media. Cape Breton Eagles making a minor trade as Matt Lint was dealt to Bathurst for a 12th-round pick that originally belonged to Rimouski. Last year, he had 1 goal in 17 games for the Eagles after being signed as a free agent, and then he was reassigned to the Moncton Flyers, a major midget team there in the New Brunswick League. Matt Lint this year will be playing with Miramichi in the Junior A ranks, so much better proximity for him to be called up as an affiliate player for Bathurst, and perhaps he'll have an opportunity to crack the roster in the second half of the season. And also another note about a player in the QMJHL, Hendrix Lapierre has signed a 3-year entry-level contract with the Washington Capitals. He was just picked this year 22nd overall in the NHL draft, has 8 points in 4 games to start the season. Last year he had 17 points in 19 games, despite being limited by an injury. Finally, we conclude with the Team of the Week in the QMJHL for the last weekend of action, and then this will be the last time that it's all Maritime players as the Quebec teams return to action this week. Elliot Denoyer of the Halifax Mooseheads is the player of the week as he had 6 points in 2 games. 20-year-old Félix-Antoine Marcotti of Bathurst, what a season he's having. 6 points in 2 games for him. And Jordan Dumais, the 16-year-old who plays on a line with Denoyer in Halifax, also named to the Team of the Week. He had 5 points in 2 games. The 2 defensemen of the week, Adam McCormick, the 20-year-old of Bathurst, formerly of the Cape Breton Eagles, 2 points plus 4 over 2 games. And 18-year-old William Trudeau of the Charlottetown Islanders had 2 assists and was plus 3 in 2 games. And no disrespect to any of these players, of course, all very talented guys, but the stats are not as eye-popping when there's only 6 teams to choose from. And as I said earlier, we'll see more teams get into the mix this weekend. Goaltender of the week is Colton Ellis. The 20-year-old of Charlottetown had a 1-0 record to goals against of 1 and a save percentage of .960. So that's the Team of the Week in the QMJHL, and that is your news from around the Q as we go trucking around the Q. You're listening to the pregame show on McDonald Auto Hub, Cape Breton Eagles Hockey, 1270 CJCB.